Hi, and welcome back to this web series on System Center Operations Manager 2012 R2 covering installation and configuration. My name is Daniel Queen, and today we're going to be doing part 5, where we're going to cover deploying a gateway server. Now, there's a lot of content in this part, and so we're just going to jump right on in. First thing we need to really do, we need to explain what is a gateway server and what are the use cases for a gateway server, because you're going to need to know well, why we use them. There are three main scenarios where we would deploy a gateway server. The first of these, and the most common one that you'll probably run into, is when you have a no trust boundary type scenario. This diagram will kind of show you what I'm talking about, because this is the situation that we're going to be demonstrating, where we have two domains, my xlab.com lab domain, and I have another domain. I just called it nutbolt.com. You can think of this as maybe a DMZ or an extranet or something like that, where you don't have a two-way trust between these two. These are actually just two different forests with no trust. The way Operations Manager works, agents must be able to Kerberos authenticate to a management server. Now, in the scenario like this, where we don't have a trust between these two, Kerberos is not possible the way I have it set up. So if you have a similar situation, like I said, this will be the most common, what you would want to do is put a gateway server in this other domain here, which acts sort of like a proxy on behalf of the management server, where the agents can Kerberos locally to this gateway server. The gateway server serves another purpose. It compresses the data and encrypts it, and then it can send it over to the management server, which will uncompress it and unencrypt it, and it will write it locally to the operations database and the data warehouse database. It does this communication using certificate-based authentication. So I have a enterprise certificate authority deployed over here in my xlab domain, and the port for gateway server to management server communication is the same as agents. It's 5723 TCP. So like I said, this will be the most common scenario that you'll find. The other Another use would be a high latency situation such as this. Now imagine I have my core infrastructure and all my management servers in, say, I don't know, Chicago, and I have an office over in, I don't know, maybe London, or maybe even somewhere closer like Mexico City. So in that case, it would be a very similar type situation where we may not even have a problem with Kerberos authentication, but this would represent a very slow link. And so we would do a similar situation. We put a gateway server locally on one end of the link where the agents can talk locally to it, and then it will compress and send the data in a single stream over to the management server. Now, a lot of people say, well, why not just put another management server over there? And that's a good question. Management servers by design open database connections simultaneously to the operations database and the data warehouse database. Now, you don't really want to be doing time-sensitive database reads and writes over such a slow connection. So it's typically better to use a gateway server at one end of a slow connection. That way it will compress the traffic and send it to the management server, who will then uncompress it and send it and write it to the databases. And the third scenario would be where you would want some tight firewall security, where that's desirable based on your security architecture. Very similar to the slow link diagram. And again, here you may not even have a trust boundary here. This might be just a firewalled off section of your network, where maybe you have 500 agents here and your security model doesn't really account for opening ports for all 500 of these servers to talk to this firewall, they want to make it as narrow scoped as possible. Well, in this case, you could put a gateway server inside your firewall, open up a port just for 5723 from the gateway server to the management server, so one-to-one, and this isn't taking into account failover from many gateway servers to many management servers, but you get the idea. The gateway or the agents could talk locally to this gateway server within the firewall, and it could stream encrypted and compressed through the firewall over to the management server to be written to the databases. So those are your three main scenarios where you would want to employ a gateway server. And there's always maybe a combination of these three. Now we've discussed the uses for gateway servers, and like I said, a gateway server, you can think of it kind of like just a proxy for a management server. It doesn't really do a whole lot else. It doesn't run the config service or the data access service. It doesn't run any of the other services. It runs just a modified version of the agent. In fact, it's the same service. So yeah, it doesn't really do a lot on its own. It can run actions like a management server, but think of it sort of halfway between an agent and a management server. Now, in this part, on the course for our deploying a gateway server, we're going to go through 3 or 4 main steps to get us from point A to point B. The first of which is we need to create our certificate template in Active Directory Certificate Services. We're going to use this template to deploy our certificates to the management servers and gateway servers. That's what will facilitate that trusted connection between the two of them. So the first thing we're going to do is create that certificate template in ADCS. Next, we're going to actually go about installing those certificates, and there is a process. It's sort of interspersed with the installing and configuring of the gateway, but installing the certificates is the next part, and finally installing and configuring the gateway server. Now sometimes this gets pretty tricky, and some people run into many pitfalls, but the way I'm going to show you how to do it, hopefully you won't run into any snags. So with all of that exposition out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right on into our domain controller. So here I am on my domain controller in my, I guess you'd say, my primary domain, which is XLab. And we are going to go into the Active Directory Certificate Services Management console. So for my server manager, I'm going to click on Tools and Certificate Authority. Okay, so we have our CA management set up. Now, first thing we want to do is we need to create this template. So let's go ahead and click on Certificate Templates, and it's going to take just a second to load here. Okay, now in order to get to the point where we can create these templates, we need to right-click and click on Manage. Now from the Certificate Templates console versus the Certificate Authority console, we need to clone off one of these old templates that we're going to use to create our SCOM certificate template. So the one we're going to use is the IPsec offline request. So let's right click on it and duplicate template. Now I've had problems before trying to up these compatibility settings, so I just leave them at Windows Server 2003 and everything works pretty well. So let's just go to General and give it a name. I'm going to call this SCOM 2012 R2 certificate. And under request handling, we must make sure to allow private key to be exported. That is very important. Under cryptography, make sure that Microsoft RSA S-channel cryptographic provider is checked, and we're also going to check Microsoft Enhanced Cryptographic Provider v1.0. Okay. Next, we're going to do nothing under key attestation. Nothing under superseded templates. Under extensions tab, we need to click on application policies, click edit. We need to remove IP security IKE intermediate, and then click add. And from here, let's highlight client authentication, and then I am going to hold Control and click server authentication, so they're both selected, and click OK. And you should see both client authentication and server authentication under the application policies now. So let's click OK. Under security, I need to give, well, I'm a domain admin, so I have read, write, and enroll on my personal. I have read and write for myself because I'm creating this. I'm going to give authenticated users just read. What I need to do is I need to give the computer account of my management server where I'm going to download and where I'm going to request all these templates. I need to give the computer account of that machine read and enroll. So I'm going to click on add, and from here I'm going to click object types, tick the computers checkbox, and I'm going to enter the name of my management server XL SCOM01. I guess this could be any computer really. It doesn't have to be your management server because we're going to export these certificates and copy them to other locations. So there we go. And it has read, writes, and enroll. There we go. And that should be pretty much everything. Under subject name, I'm going to tell it to supply in the request. Under server, nothing. Issuance requirements, you can do this if your organization requires it, but I'm not going to bother with it. So I'm going to click OK, and there we go. So we're done here. We can close this. Now we need to actually issue this template. So let's right click on certificate templates in our certificate authority console. We're going to go into new and certificate templates issue. And this will take just a second to load. Okay. And in this enable certificate templates dialog, we want to scroll down and click on our SCOM 2012 R2 certificate and click OK. And it should now be issued. We can see right there. And that's all we need to do on our domain controller. Okay, so I'm here on my excuse me, on my management server, and we need to ensure one thing is done real quick first. Under server manager, go to local server, make sure your IE enhanced security configuration is off, because that is going to majorly get in the way of what we're about to do. So let's open Internet Explorer, and I do not like viewing it in that mode, so we're going to view it in the desktop. Okay, so I need to browse to my certificate authority. Okay, so I need to do a few things. Just to make this easy real quick, I'm going to make a folder on my desktop. I'm just going to call this GW certs. Just a place to put all my stuff. So the first thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and grab the certificate chain. And I don't need this here in my XLab domain because being a server in the domain, it already has the root CA certificate. But I'm going to need to send this over to my nutbolt.com server so it will trust my certificate chain. So when you get this web access confirmation dialog box, just tell it yes. If you get errors and you don't see this web access confirmation, go into your internet options and check and make sure you don't have any overly restrictive ActiveX settings that are blocking anything. So I'm just going to tell it yes. In my case, I don't really need the chain because I've only got one certificate authority, but it's not going to hurt anything. I'll go ahead and grab the chain. In my case, I just need the certificate. So we're going to go ahead and save that as cert chain. I'm going to save it in my gateway certs folder. So that's done. Now I'm going to go back to the home page, and we're going to click on request a certificate. We want to submit an advanced certificate request. We want to click on create and submit a request to this CA, and this will take just a second to load. Okay, again, click on the confirmation. It's just telling that it wants to perform a certificate operation on my behalf. Just tell yes. Our template is going to be the SCOM 2012 R2 certificate. Now, in the identifying information for the offline template, The name is going to be the fully qualified domain name of the management server. We're going to do one for the management server, one for the gateway server. So we'll start with the management server first. We're going to call this one xlscom01.xlab.com. My email, I'll just make one up, dqueen@xlab.com. Company. I fill all this stuff out, but okay. You can put the key size whatever you want. The minimum has to be 1024. Higher security means higher overhead to process the key, but it's whatever your organization needs. Make sure mark keys as exportable is checked. And under friendly name, I'm going to use the fully qualified domain name again, xlscom01.xlab.com. Submit, and we're going to wait for the response. Once more, we have the confirmation, so let's click yes. And I'm going to click install this certificate. This is actually going to install it to my user personal store, not the computer personal store, but that's okay because we're going to be exporting this out momentarily. So there we go. It's been successfully installed. We're going to go back to the home and we're going to do this whole process over again for the gateway now. Okay, so here I am back at the advanced certificate request. This time we're going to do our server in the nutbolt.com domain, or wherever you're putting your gateway server. It doesn't have to be in another domain. It could be in the same domain, could be behind a firewall, could be over the high latency connection. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to, in our case, which is a different domain, we're going to punch in the name of the server that's going to act as our gateway server, which is nbgw01.nutbolt.com. Again, I'm going to fill out this information. Okay, again, put your key size in here. Mark the key as exportable, and in the friendly name, put the fully qualified name again. nbgw01.nutbolt.com, submit. We're going to say yes to the confirmation. We're going to install the certificate. Okay, it's been installed. So now we are done with our certificate authority. Pretty simple, really. You don't have to go to all your other machines out there and do this process. Depending on your situation, most of the time you can get away with deploying all your certificates onto one machine and then exporting them out from there. So I'm done here. Next, I'm going to open up my MMC console. I'm going to go to File, Add, Remove, Snap-in. I'm going to go to Certificates, Add. Since those were installed to my user account instead of the computer one, I'm just going to manage certificates for a user account. Click Finish and OK. I'm going to expand out certificates for current user, expand out personal, and look at the certificates there, and there's both of the ones that we requested. And we could see that the template that issued them was the SCOM template that we created. So I'm going to export this first one. So let's right click on it, all tasks, and export. And this is the management server one we're doing. I'm going to click next. Yes, we want to export the key. Again, this is very important. So select yes. Click next. I do not want to include all certificates in the certification path. I do want to export all the extended properties, and I don't need this. I don't need this to hang around in the certificate store when I'm done. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and leave this in here and delete it later in case something goes amiss. So normally I would not delete this right away. I'd wait until I ensure that the gateway is working and then delete it by hand, but I'm confident that this will work, so I'm going to go ahead and tell it to delete the private key if the export is successful. So I'm going to click next. I'm going to give this a password instead of using a group. There we go. I'm going to click next. We're going to pick a location and a name. I'm going to put it in that same folder. We're going to call this one xlscom01cert. Click next and finish. Export was successful, and if I refresh, it should be gone. Huh. Well, I guess it doesn't want to go away. That's fine. I'll just delete it by hand later. Let me make sure it's actually there. Yeah, it's there. Strange. So we're going to do the same thing on our gateway one. Let's right click on it, go to all tasks. We're going to go to export, click next. Yes, export the private key, click next. Do not include all certificates. Export all extended properties. I'm just going to leave this delete unchecked this time. Oh, it's just delete the private key, not deleting the entire certificate. Well, that's silly. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this unchecked and delete it all by hand. Oh, that makes sense. That's why there's a key here and not a key on the one I exported earlier. So click next, give this one a password. Click next, give it a file name. We're going to call this one nbgw01 cert. Click next and finish. Export was successful. Like I said, I don't want either of these hanging around, so I'm going to select them both, right click and delete and say yes, because I don't need these to be living here in my certificate store. So now I'm done with this MMC snap-in. Now a couple other things I'm going to do. Actually, we'll get around to the next step here on our management server in a little bit. So next we need to go ahead and copy these two certificates, the chain and the gateway certificate, over to our gateway itself. So here I am on my gateway server, nbgw01.nutbolt.com, so I'm in the nutbolt domain now, and using whatever favorite method you like, we need to go ahead and get those two certificates over here. I'm just going to use a UNC path here. There we go, and it's fine. There we go. I'm going to create a similar folder here on my gateway, GW certs, just here on the desktop to keep everything organized. And let's just copy these. Actually, I'm just going to move them because I don't need them to live on my management server. So there we go. Here on my gateway now I have these two. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and install my certificate chain. So in order to install my certificate, I am going to open up my MMC snap-in. And I know there's another way to do this, but this is the way I like doing it. So I'm going to go to File, Add, Remove Snap-in, Certificates, click Add, Computer Account, click Next, Finish, and OK. I'm going to expand out Certificates, go down to Trusted Root Certification Authorities, click on Certificates, and in my white space down here, I'm going to right-click, go to All Tasks, and Import. I'm going to click Next, Browse, and you'll see nothing, but that's because I need to switch this from X509 down to PKCS number 7. And there's my chain. If I had just exported the certificate by itself instead of the chain, it would have been a .cer, so it would have been an X509. But this works either way. So now that we have it selected, let's click Next, and that's the right store. So click Next again and Finish, and we'll wait for it to import. Okay, the import was successful. Let's click OK, and now we can see there we have it. So I'm done with my MMC for now. Okay, so now we've got our certificates distributed, and I've got my root certificate, my root CA's certificate installed into the trusted store. So now let's actually get our hands dirty installing the gateway. For this, I want to go back to my management server, and we're going to start configuring it from here. So what we need is we need to go ahead and load the installation media. I have it mounted already. So open up the installation media, and once you're in here, we're going to look for the support tools folder, so double click on that. My architecture is 64-bit, so AMD 64, and we're looking for a few different files, the first of which is the gateway approval tool and gateway approval tool xe.config. Sorry, it's actually Microsoft.enterprisemanagement.gateway approval tool and ditto.xe.config. So select both of these, right click, copy, and we're going to copy them to our SCOM installation directory. So I'm going to open up my root of C, go to Program Files, Microsoft System Center 2012 R2, Operations Manager, Server, and I'm going to paste it in the server folder. So click Continue and Continue. There we go. And we can see it is indeed right there. While I'm at it, just to save myself a step a little bit later, I'm going to, on my installation media in the same folder, I'm going to find momcert import. And I'm going to right click and copy this one, and I'm going to paste it in my gateway certs folder. There we go, because I'm going to need that one here in a little bit. So now what we need to do is we need to open an administrative command prompt. So with this open, what we're about to do is we're about to run a tool called the Gateway Approval Tool. What this will do is this will load in the gateway information into the SCOM environment before we actually install the gateway agent on the gateway server. We do it in this order for one basic reason. Like, I remember earlier I told you that the gateway agent is actually the exact same agent as, well, the monitoring agent is Microsoft Monitoring Agent. If you install the gateway software first, it will attempt to talk to the environment. And if you have your environment set up for not to automatically approve your agents into your environment, it'll show up in pending management as an agent, which we don't want. We don't want it to come in as an agent, we want it to be as a gateway server. So if you do it in this order, it will prevent it from showing up as an agent later on. One topic to bring up real quick about security on this tool, because it will bite you in the rear end, especially in an enterprise organization if you're not careful. Now, this is not really documented by Microsoft, so this is another gotcha. In order to run this gateway approval tool, you need some rights still on your operations manager database. The minimum privileges I found that you absolutely have to have is read, write, and you need to be able to execute stored procedures on that database. Now, in my case, I was sysadmin, of course, when I installed the first management server and configured the databases. And even after pulling it, it left me as database owner, a DBO role. So that would suffice. If you're in a situation where you don't have any rights, you don't have DBO, you don't have sysadmin, you need to get your DBAs to create you a role where you can at least run those stored procedures and read. And it really doesn't hurt to go ahead and have a read, write, and execute store procedure on both your data warehouse and your operations database just going forward for maintenance and troubleshooting. But note, if you don't have any rights to your database, the gateway approval tool will hang. So if you're having problems with it, that's one of the first things I would look at. So we're going to browse to our SCOM installation directory on our management server. So into the server folder where we copied the gateway approval tool. And you can see that the two files we're looking for are indeed there. So here's what we're going to type. It's going to be Microsoft.enterprisemanagement.gatewayapprovaltool.exe. And if you do /? You can see what all the switches are. All but one of these is required. So the first one I need to do is management server name. And when gateways are like agents, they only talk to one management server. Now you can set up failover, but it doesn't talk to a pool of them. So when you run this gateway approval tool, it will snap the gateway to one management server. when I say snap, it will configure it that the environment thinks that the gateway server should be talking to this particular management server. And actually, you can configure multiple ones from here. You don't have to go to each management server to rerun this. So management server name equals xlscom01.xlab.com. We use fully qualified domain names for these switches. The next one is / gateway name, not gateway server name, but gateway name equals nbgw01.nutbolt.com. Now, the site name switch here is optional. And what this will do is when you have your agents communicating with the gateway server, when an alert gets generated in your SCOM environment, and if it comes from an agent that's talking to that gateway server, it can be tagged with the site you give it. So if this was a DMZ, you could call it DMZ. And there's an optional field that you can view in there where it will say, oh, it's from the DMZ site. It just kind of helps, and you can base notification criteria off of that and everything. Now, your main sites don't actually have a site name, which is odd, but it's just another thing that you can do. In this case, I'm not going to bother with it. Normally I do, but in this case, I'm not going to do it. So the next required one is action equals create. And then there's actually one more optional switch where it is management server initiates connection. Remember how I told you that well, if you saw in the diagram that it's 5723 TCP, it's unidirectional. So it makes that connection from gateway server to management server, similar how to an agent initiates the connection and then the management server responds. You can set it up here to where the management server initiates the connection, depending on your network requirements. Maybe it's a firewall requirement. So you can actually flip it around. But in this case, that's fine. So I'm going to hit enter, and we're going to wait for a minute. And it doesn't take very long at all. If it takes more than 15, 20, 30 seconds maybe, then you probably have a permissions issue. So approval of server nbgw01.nutbolt.com completed successfully. Huzzah! And if you open up your operations console now, we will see this as a management server. Now, don't be misled here. This says healthy, but it is only because I was mucking about with testing this earlier, and I had it snapped together. It still thinks that it's in there from earlier when I deleted it. So normally yours would actually come in and say not monitored. You see how mine has no domain, no version, no action account, and things like that. Normally this would be a green circle with nothing in the middle of it. This would just be a blank white circle and say unmonitored or not monitored, I forget which, but it would not say healthy. This is not what you would see when you first did this. Like I said, this is just because I had it in there healthy and working earlier, and I deleted it out before I made this video. So you would see this in here to know that your command worked fine, and you wouldn't see it showing up in pending management or agent managed. So just know that, like I said, this not what you would see. So don't freak out if it doesn't look like this. So, but we know that it brought it into the environment. Okay, so we're not done yet though. This thing is not talking. So now that we've done the gateway approval tool, we need to go ahead and go over to our gateway server itself and install the gateway server service. Okay, so I'm here on my gateway server once again, nbgw01.nutbolt.com. I've got my installation media mounted. I'm just going to run setup. And I know I actually called it the gateway server service. It's really just the monitoring agent, but you get the idea. So we're going to not click on install, but go down here to gateway management server under optional installations. Okay, so let's click next. Agree. Pick the installation folder. We're going to type in our management group name, which is xlab. The management server we're going to attempt to talk to is xlscom01.xlab.com. I don't remember if I actually brought this up or not, but one of the requirements for doing gateway server to management server communication, just like agent to management server communication, is you have to have good DNS resolution. And as you can see from my gateway server, I can ping xlscom01.xlab.com. I've got a couple conditional forwarders set up between my domains. If you're in the same domain, probably don't have that problem. But just know that you got to have DNS resolution between the two. So if you got to do a host entry, do that, or get DNS working, whichever you want to do. The management server port is configurable here. I'm going to keep it 5723. Now, I don't know if I may have not been clear on this before, but when we do these action accounts, this is not actually the account that the service runs under, per se. It runs under local system either way, but you have the option of using the gateway action account, much like our management server action account, which will run rules. If you define it to run that as that account, it can run other actions, diagnostic actions. It can also go and install other agents. So if the account you use here happens to be, say, a local server admin type role, so it's an admin on every server, you could then use this account to go and install other agents. If you choose not to use this, then of course you can always specify specific credentials. But I actually do have an account made for my gateway action account, which is in the nutbolt domain. I called it svc underscore scom GW. Not very creative, but there we go. Let's just click next. I don't want to use update because I'm not connected to the internet. Next and install. And this install should go fairly quick. Okay, now that is finished. So we should have our gateway installation complete. Now there's one last step we need to do, and that is to import those bright and shiny certificates that we exported. We need to import these into the health service, the Microsoft Monitoring Agent service. That's why we didn't need them actually installed in the certificate store. We're actually going to import these into the service itself, and which will put it into the SCOM environment so that they will authenticate each other. Now, I have had some better success. I should have thought of this before. I have had better success by doing the management server first and then the gateway server. For some reason, it just seems to work better that way. It doesn't really matter which order you do it in, but I have noticed if I do the gateway server side first, that I end up having to wait a lot longer before the two sort of snap together. So I'm actually going to switch back over to my management server here. So I'm here on my management server, and I don't know why I just closed that, because the next thing I need is an administrative command prompt. So we're going to import this certificate, XL-SCOM-01 cert. We're going to import it into the health service on our management server, not the data access service or anything. It's actually the Microsoft Monitoring Agent service. So to do that, we're going to use this momcert import tool. Now, if you actually had this certificate still in your store, it's supposed to go and find it. So you can just select which one you want. I find it better just to export it and have it sitting right here. So I'm going to browse to this folder. Okay, and there's our stuff. So I'm just going to type momcert import and the name of the certificate. It'll ask for the password that we set way back in the beginning. And it doesn't take very long at all. It says it successfully installed the certificate. I actually like to bounce the Microsoft Monitoring Agents service right after doing this. It's used to kind of really have to do that, and I just like to do it for just to be safe anyway. So I'm going to use net stop health service && net start health service. There we go. That'll just stop it and then restart it from the command line. Okay, there we go. Now we need to do the exact same step over on the gateway server. Now I realize that I forgot to bring over the momcert import tool. I could copy it over from the management server, but I still have the installation media here. So it was under support tools, pick the architecture, and there it is, momcert import. Copy that. Paste it right there. Okay, so again, let's open an elevated command prompt. So run as administrator. And again, can see there's our file. So we're going to run mom cert import, and we're going to do our gateway certificate, which was nbgw01cert.pfx. Hit enter, type in the password, and like I said, it doesn't take very long at all. It says it successfully installed the certificate, so I'm going to bounce the health service again just to be safe. You may not have to do this. Just call me paranoid. So net stop health service double ampersand net start health service, or you could just use the services console and do a restart. Okay, that's done. That should be all we have to do. Now, I will say this, after you have done all this stuff, actually verifying the connectivity, the event viewers on these two servers will be your best friends, and all your troubleshooting is going to come from those event viewers. We can cross our fingers and check in the console and see what's going on there first, which we should do, and then if we're not seeing good communication, then we'll start going to the event viewers. So let's go ahead and go over to our management server, cross our fingers, and hope for the best. So one thing I want to show you, again, like I said, don't take this healthy health state here to be any indication of something, because like I said, SCOM still has some leftover state data from when I had this in there before and I deleted it. It hadn't been groomed out of the database yet. So obviously, because the domain here and version and the action account, none of that's been populated yet, we can tell it hasn't really started communicating with the environment yet. So one thing I wanted to show you here, I'm going to go over to my gateway server. One of the hallmarks, and I will tell you this is one of the single best ways to know that your agents or gateway servers are actually communicating with the management server, is if they're downloading management packs. If you get to the point where you're downloading a management pack, you have made a successful connection and communication is just going smooth. I'll put it that way. When I last did this was probably 12 hours ago, so I know that at 12:14 at 12:07 a.m. it's currently 12:10 a.m. So the fact that I am downloading a management pack, I'm here on my gateway server. So if I'm receiving management packs from the management server, that means that communication is a-okay. We're in the clear. If you don't get this and you start getting, say, errors in the event log saying that, connection was closed, things like that, you're going to need to go back and check on your certificates. You're going to need to go back and check on maybe your templates. You need to go back and there's several troubleshooting steps, which is really out of the scope of this video. But just know that if you're like, well, man, it's not really showing up. If you see that you're downloading management packs, just give it some time, because it is actually working. And looks like successfully logged in, is run as account, and all this kind of stuff. So I mean, I'm not seeing really any critical alerts or critical events over here. So when I come back over here and refresh it, yep, look, there we go. The name changed. It found the domain, found the version, found the action account. So we have a gateway server that is in business. Now, I'm not going to actually go into deploying agents in this video. I think that one is a couple more parts down the line where we're going to install a variety of agents in a variety of scenarios. But I do want to show you that, I mean, now that we have this gateway server installed, we can actually install agents from this console in a completely different domain. We can go and install agents in a different domain completely remotely now. We don't have to log on to servers. So, just as a quick example, in my nut bolt domain, I have a domain controller. I don't have anything else to put an agent on, but I have this NBDC01. So from my management server, say I have no more access into the domain, just for argument's sake. Say that, okay, I got it installed, they pulled my access, I can't get over there anymore. If SCOM GW had rights to install it, we'd be golden. But what I want to show you is the discovery wizard here. We can click on Windows Computers, go next. This is going to be servers only. The management server is going to be our gateway server. I'm going to browse for computers. I'm just going to type it in manually. So if I were to go to nbdc01.nutbolt, Click on next. The selected management server action account, which for my gateway is this account right here. If this actually had rights on the domain controller to install, like I said, that'd be great. I actually don't have this set up as a domain admin right now, so I am actually going to use my domain admin account over there. And you do have the option of making it a local account instead of a domain account. But you can click discover, and of course this is in a different domain. I can't authenticate that these are correct credentials, so I'm just going to tell it to continue yes. It's going to go out, and from that gateway server it will go and look, and hey, look, there it is. I can select, and you can do a whole list of agents, but I can select the one I want there, tell it that it's going to talk to the management server, or the gateway server in this case. It's agent or agentless, and you click next, and you can specify the agent that we're going to install local system, run it under an account, where to put it, and click finish, and it will go and install it completely remotely. That's just one of the scenarios you could do, but you get the idea. You have a lot of flexibility with gateway servers, and as I explained beforehand, there's some security benefits, there's network benefits, and really just design of your environment benefits to having this gateway server. So like I said, they're very, very useful, very powerful, and really they are necessary to a successful SCOM environment and a SCOM design. So I hope that you are able to install your gateways without many hitches. If you have any problems, you can try and hit me up in the comments, and I'll see what I can do to help out. But I think if you follow this part pretty well to the T, then you should not have too many issues. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.